Well, it is 3 o'clock by my watch, so I want to go ahead and welcome everyone to our Fishbowl conversation. A delightful end to an incredibly vigorous and rich and vital set of conversations, starting with the Thursday retreat. It's been a very full weekend, so some attended the theological retreat on Thursday. We had the annual gathering Friday and Saturday. So we have a delightful panel here. I believe if you've participated all weekend and read through the program, all of these names will be very familiar to you. So we have Reverend Amy Mears, who is one of the pastors at Glendale Baptist Church in Nashville. And she led a workshop. Some of you probably attended, and some of you may have read her chapter in the wonderful book that we are that accompanies our weekend, called Taking on the Cross. And the title of her essay in her workshop handles Not Writing Anymore: The Liturgical Arts After Atonement. We also have the Reverend Anita Peebles, who is the associate pastor at First Baptist Church, Seattle. She also has a chapter and presented a workshop that I'm sure many of you attended. And it is entitled Accompanying Children in Constructing a Theology of Jesus's Death. And I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, that is really, really out of my wheelhouse, as is Reverend Mears' contribution. So reading those gifted me greatly. So I hope that some of you got to attend that workshop. We have Dejon Campbell, who is Congregational Engagement and Development Specialist for the Alliance of Baptists and staff person represented. We have Reverend Dejon Campbell, Reverend Drew Bongiovanni, who is a chaplain at Emory University Healthcare, working with patients in psychiatric care. And she co-presented on pastoral care and the cross with Reverend Robert Renix, a UCC clergy person serving as hospital director of chaplaincy services and CPE certified educator in the DC area. So we have 1 hour ahead of us to, and some of you may have seen Brent Newberry on there. We got word that he was unable to attend this afternoon. He is doing fine, and sends his regards. So we'll miss him, but I promise you we have plenty to talk about for the next hour. I want to go ahead and just state that the overarching theme of the Fishbowl conversation will be to allow the panelists to discuss the ideas shared over the 3 days of our Alliance of Baptist meetings and what they will be taking away from the experience, both for themselves and for their wider ministries. So this will be the overarching theme, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump in by starting with a question. So here is the first question I would like to pose to each panelist. So this has been a very full weekend, as we said. And what I want to know is, as you think back over these past 3 days, what is one thing or more, but at least one, that has surprised you? So maybe it's a new idea, an unexpected emotion, some kind of dynamic you experienced in a conversation, but something you would consider new. Anita, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think that something that I wasn't totally expecting was just the diversity of where people are on their journey of thinking about atonement theologies. I think it's really beautiful that we have such a wide range of ideas and questions and feelings about atonement, about the meaning of Jesus' death within the Alliance. And that just really tells me that we have a lot to learn from each other and that we can have some really rich discussions. I think some things that are sticking with me are, I think early in the conference, maybe on the first day, the relationship of atonement theology to nation building and the interaction with trauma through control and empire and religious manipulation. Like that whole intersection is just really really bouncing around in my brain. And so I think we see that relationship in history and today in the USA. And I'm just really interested in where these conversations will take the Alliance.
Good. Thank you. Yes. How about if we go to Dejon?
I think Anita said it all. Dang it, Anita. But one thing that really stood out to me was the openness to have a conversation like this. I grew up in an environment where you did not question God. The thought of even having a conversation about or putting up questions about the cross or about Jesus or what that meant. And I mean, that would get you in trouble in my church. And so being in a place now where we are not only having the conversation, but we're challenging our faith, we're asking questions about our faith. And there is this openness and this just sincerity to really understand what the life and ministry and death and resurrection of Jesus means, was something that really stood out to me and something I'll take away. Nice. I've never been in an environment like this, I'll say that.
So diversity and the notions of kind of empire and the relation between those, and then the openness and a place, a kind of safe place, I hear you saying, just really kind of try it out, thought experiment. No one's signing on the dotted line for life, right? Just what would it be like if we thought of it this way instead of that way? So then, of course, makes you wonder, these experiences are always kind of mountaintop experiences to come together with folks like this who care to question as deeply, as you do, right? And then the trick is always, how do we create these spaces after we leave each other and go back to our respective places of ministry? Why is it this way? Why have we been able to do this? What makes it so? And how can we kind of replicate that? So that's a good word. Amy, could I ask you to jump in?
Absolutely. Early on in the week, an unexpected emotion that I experienced was utter delight in watching the faces on the screen, listening to Rita Nakashima Brock and watching the art that she was projecting. And I mean, people's eyeballs were just gone because there was this whole class of us that were going, this is huge and it's amazing and it's brand new to me. Or, even some of us who read her Proverbs of Ashes and Saving Paradise years ago were still going, that's why that book knocked me over, because it's huge and groundbreaking and life-staking. So that was a grand moment for me as a member of the planning committee who was trying to plan something that would be really engaging and enlightening and would make people's eyeballs go up. So that was my first big emotional awareness. And the other thing was that given the wideness of the spectrum that we've already heard named here, from people like from John Ballinger and Russ Dean's sermon that recapped the 20 years that they've been literally having this conversation, to people who are like, can you say that? I mean, where are the church police? We used to get, we burn people at the stake for this. That's been engaging and fun. And as Dejon and Anita have both said, an invitation to us for continuing this conversation.
And I love that. I love that you highlighted the emotion too, because I think what I heard in lots of ways over the weekend was also an attention to embodiment. Sometimes people put it in terms of incarnation and ongoing incarnation. And it seems like part of the issue I heard people saying is that notions and doctrines of atonement have actually been kind of dissociated from people's real bodies, or understanding how these doctrines get mapped out onto particular people's bodies or groups of people's bodies. And so taking emotion seriously epistemologically as a source of knowledge and a source of revelation isn't bonus and a side thing. And so it's something I really appreciate about those of you who put the put the whole thing together. And wow, I mean, you couldn't have kicked it off in any more powerful way with more powerful presentations than we had. So we were kind of set up to be drawn in our whole selves, right? So kudos to all of you, and thanks for highlighting the emotion part, Amy. And I want to welcome to Reverend Renix is now here with us. I'll give him a minute to gather his thoughts while I call on Drew.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And I think that aspect of embodiment is something that's really I'm reflecting on more and more, because one of the things that for me, a theme of the whole weekend that's helping me really think about how do I think all of this together is the question of what does it mean to really reckon with suffering, not just to name the sufferings in the world, but what do we do with that? How do we care for ourselves? To think about suffering being part of the biblical story and part of our story. And so Ebony Marshall Terman, she invited us to consider that with the embodied aspect of the cross, that the cross demands that we pay attention to bodies that suffer in our world. And so what's coming up for me is like, how do we pay attention? How do we reckon? One of those things for me is how do we grieve? How do we allow grief to be part of what we must honor and acknowledge? Because so much of when we think about the cross, I think how I've been taught to think about it is informed by the fear of death in our world, and fear of death in our culture. So we want Jesus's suffering to have meaning. We want our suffering to have meaning. We want death to have meaning. And so then we are so surprised when we're trying to focus on all that meaning and we have all these difficult emotions because we actually haven't attended to the grief. And we actually haven't allowed the grief. And so I'm really considering how do I go into the work of asking these questions, supporting grief, supporting my grief, supporting the grief of others, and knowing that that's really hard for us to do in general, and even harder for us to do in the context of this discussion around what's most sacred to us. So that's new for me, and that's a dynamic I'm really turning over in my mind and paying attention to.
I'll look forward to hearing how that develops, because I automatically think, again, one of the things I just love about this panel is we have from, again, children, which is not my bailiwick, and then liturgy that Amy's doing, that everybody's coming from a different set of expertise. And so if you take something like grief, what you're saying, and one thing I've noticed about the whole weekend too, is the emphasis on community. It's not just embodiment, but also the number of times the word community has been used and emphasized about, theories of salvation or the problems with atonement and individualism. So, the gift of something like that, Drew, where you raise that up, and then what's that like to take it back to community and get everybody involved in the conversation, and how do we kind of make it part of our what we do together, is rich. Yeah, good. And welcome to Reverend Renix. And so the question I have posed is this. So after all of this intense, wonderful weekend, starting with the theological retreat on Thursday and all the workshops and worship, here is the question I am posing. As you think back over the past 3 days, what is the one thing that has surprised you? So whether it's a new idea, an unexpected emotion, the dynamic in a conversation, or just anything that has struck you particularly as new since Thursday till now.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me a moment to I was on in the truck and then all kinds of things, but what is the one thing? I think the one thing that has, I don't know if it's new or surprised me, but I would say that it's I guess it's new, is the depth of my love for the Alliance. As your incoming president of the board, prayers please. I have a whole lot to think about, but what I was most amazed by is the amount of courage and faith and endurance that the Alliance has to take on such a task. I was in a small group with Dr. Walker, and we were discussing some stuff. He was telling me that he can't think of any organization that is approaching what we're approaching in a way of reimagining the cross. And when I think about that, I think about all of our stands from women's rights to GLBTQIA to anti-racism to being anti-white supremacy. So all of these different things kind of culminated for me at the cross these past few days. And we as an organization constantly find the edges and see how we can either make them sharper if needed or rub them off so they're softer. But as a body, you know, I've heard Ubuntu before, and I thoroughly enjoyed Kendra's rendition and unpacking that. But I was so amazed at the depth of my love for the Alliance, because I'm not in an Alliance church, but I'm most certainly an Alliance identified. I heard you announcing me, UCC is second, it's Alliance of Baptists first. I grew up Baptist, so I'm always Baptist. But that was the one thing that surprised me because we have tough conversations. And we have them often, and we have them frequent, and we have them authentically, and we have them without judgment, and we have them with this openness that I have never found anywhere else. You know, I'm a CPE educator and a chaplain, but we have not had these types of conversations and be engaged in a way that it's about building relationships with one another, no matter where we are. And it's about building those relationships so that what builds in our relationships spills over into our partner organization and spills over into our communities. So I'm walking away with a heart full of love and a whole head full of a lot of ideas and thoughts. But it's been a very enriching weekend. And I want to say thank you to Tim again and again and again, and everyone that worked behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, because there's no way this would have gone off without your energy, your effort, your commitment, your tenacity, your perseverance, and maybe sometimes your cursing, probably all of the above, but most certainly also with your prayers. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's stunning. And to me, it's quite a testament, just the attendance. I mean, especially this late, if anybody's on an academic schedule and all of you pastors are on an Easter schedule, the time of year, people kind of don't have a lot of extra energy. And so the fact that there's just been this consistent attendance and engagement is such a testament to all the good work of everybody who put it together and just how vital the subject is. It's gripping. People want to know, they want to talk about it, they want to think about it. So that's so well said. And I love the way that Kendra also was talking about what you brought up, Robert. We are in really different places, and the people we will go out and have this conversation with are in different places, and her focus on kindness instead of impatience or derogating people who, why don't you get it? What's your problem? Are you mean? Just the be kind to ourselves and be kind to others who are in different spots. She just, and also people live it, which helps a lot too. Kind of think, wow, she can do it. Maybe I can try. And I also struck, it seems like when I wonder how these conversations go so well at Alliance, it seems to me there's always a good sense of humor as well. Along with humility, there's just a lot of laughing. And if you can laugh when you're talking about atonement, you must be having some kind of family conversation, And then another thing that your comment made me think about is the Alliance does so well is could you repeat the phrase you said that I loved so much? Somebody caught part of it. We find the edges, and you said we either sharpen or soften. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, we find the edges in life and in our faith, and we either make them sharper so that they can cut what needs to be cut, okay, or we round them off so that they're softer and they don't cut. And what I love about the Alliance is it's a both and. We are so far removed. I don't think sometimes we realize it from an either or thinking. So we're always going, okay, it's that, but and it's that.
Yeah.
And that it always takes me back to my own theology. God is both far and near. And it just depends on how you experience it and what's happening in that experience. So that's what it is. We do a lot with those edges.
Mhm.
And those edges are in politics and community and in social and in our culture. And no matter where it is, we'll find it and we'll approach it. And that's what's beautiful. Like, we don't shy away from it.
Yeah.
We go right in and said, okay, let's see what needs to be done. And that's what we do.
It's so well said. And I think another thing we do then is we produce resources that are practical and useful. And this is the thing, reading Anita's and Amy's essays in there. Yes, they have sound, deep theology. They're well read. I mean, Anita's over there quoting Catherine Tanner, who, by the way, is, not light reading. But you can read that. I will be assigning that for a fact in my class. I teach on evil, suffering, and death in the New Testament, because there's not that much out there about children and theodicy. And it's so practical, the resources we provide. So they're theologically grounded, they're really smart. And you can also start doing something today in your church when you use Alliance resources. So I should say, I didn't introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Jaime Clark-Soles. I teach New Testament. I'm ordained in the American Baptist churches, but also obviously part of Alliance. And I go to Royal Lane Baptist Church here in Dallas, which is an Alliance church, of course, and love the Alliance. So wonderful. Okay, are you all ready for question 2? That was already so rich. Question 2 is this. What theological or biblical insight from this weekend will you be wrestling with in your own faith journey in the days ahead? A theological or biblical insight? And why don't we just go backwards? We want to start, Robert?
Sure. I'll have to look you up. I will be moving to Dallas sometime this summer.
Oh, yay.
Oh, no, for real.
100%. 100%.
And Robert, I live in Dallas, so we have one big Dallas party going on here.
Awesome.
All right, well, let's connect.
Anybody else in Dallas, let me know so I can see everybody.
Let's connect. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Theologically, I think that one thing that really stands to me is I really have to read the Gospels again. Like, I have to just start over. It's like, scrap it all. Let's start over with fresh eyes, openness to hear what is being said, and to, I think, suspend a lot of the things I've believed and I've thought, and to investigate and explore what I was taught that nobody said, because I believe we learn a lot that people don't say. It's like, and so I was saying yesterday in one of the breakouts, my grandmother, if I said atonement, she just looked at me like, what? And I said, well, Jesus on the cross. That's what you need to remember. Jesus died on the cross. That's where she's going. That's what you mean. Jesus died and he rose. That's what she's going to tell you. And so in that and in church, I don't remember hearing such words as atonement and all and the things we talk about theologically until I got to seminary and in ministry. So so theologically it's like somebody just blew it all up. This weekend just kind of blew it up. For me to go back and look, I don't intend to scrap everything. I don't intend to redo everything, but I do intend to step back with fresh eyes to relook at everything.
Nice.
And that's the theological implication for me.
I love it. Thank you. Drew, what about you?
So many things. I think we've had such a good conversation about remembering about the forces of power and oppression that exist in the water of so many of these concepts, and that it's our work and task to name that and try to say, how can we pull away from those dynamics where they exist? I think it was Laura Mayo who is naming that so much of how the story of the cross has been told and changed is designed to put us in isolation, to be told that we are individually responsible for Jesus's death and that we are also individually not enough, and to put us in this place of being alone, and therefore saying that this is something, a tool of power and control. And, Kendra was offered one new way of thinking about salvation happening moment to moment in community.
Mhm.
The idea of like, how can we pull away from this idea of being stuck in this individual isolation and saying we are community and we have the ability to do the work of justice and peace together, including naming and calling out the way theology has been used to hurt individuals and hurt communities. And so that there is a way through, and that way through is in a group together, like this group we've had this weekend. And so I think that's what I'm thinking about, is that none of these ideas and concepts have to hold us back. And there is so much relief and hope in just being able to name them with others.
That's beautifully said. Thank you. Dejon, you want to jump in?
I will jump into the fishbowl. I
Swim, my friend, swim.
I'm swimming. I'm trying to. I think one big thing that stood out to me was realizing that a lot of my theology was rooted in personal bias or experience and not necessarily biblical truth. And I what Robert said really resonated with me, because up until me even joining the Alliance, this gathering was promoted and I was joining the staff, and I had some people say, well, you're going to go and join that organization? They're talking about the atonement. And I mean, are you crazy? You just dyed your hair. Are you okay? And it was this thought of, all you need to know and all you need to believe is that blood was shed for you. He died for you. You aren't worthy enough. You can never be worthy enough. And all of that was kind of challenged with this gathering in a good way. As someone who is Black, a Black man, as someone who is a part of the LGBTQ community, I have always been in spaces where I did not feel like I was enough. And Christianity played a role in that. I didn't even feel like enough in church. And so to have a conversation where we are reimagining the meaning of Jesus' life and death, reading the book and listening to everything over these past couple of days has been so refreshing and reviving for me. And it's something that I'll definitely going to go back and, first I'm going to call my college professor, my biblical studies degree, and say, what were you talking about in that class? I want my money back. But really just rethinking everything that I was taught and asking questions about everything that I was taught, and also going to God about it as well. So that's what it did for me. Oh, did we lose her?
Yeah, I think
We might have lost Jamie. I think you were next.
Yeah,
keep it moving.
Jamie will come back in. If not, somebody needs to access the questions real quick. Tim, I'm looking at you.
I have the questions here.
Okay. So the thing that has really stumped with me is violence. Like of the kind of demographics that have come into this conversation in the past 4 days, there's a substantial group of people who've been influenced largely by the historic peace church's approach to conversations about atonement theologies, who got there through Denny Weaver or Sharon Butler, the Mennonite scholars. And so the being shaped by, and to some degree rejecting, the violence of the cross as having implications for me and the way I follow Jesus. So there's that. And in our alliance, there's a significant group of people who come to questions about atonement theologies through liberation theologians of various stripes who are saying, my people are a crucified people, right? We are crucified people. Violence continues to shape every minute of every day that we live. We can't dispense with the violence. We are living the violence. And that's a very fraught conversation, right? For our alliance to be able to have. And if we're going to continue this conversation, I think it's incumbent upon us to figure out together where the landmines are, to stay in the violent metaphors arena there, to figure out where the sticking points are going to be that are gonna hamstring us as we try to continue this conversation together.
I guess it's me, though. I see Jamie is in the waiting room, so she's coming back. Welcome back, Jamie. Yeah, the theological stuff that I'm really taking with me is, as Drew already mentioned, Dr. Terman's emphasis on embodiment and incarnation is deeply meaningful to me. I think a lot about embodiment, and I try to in my work have a playful and sensory kind of ministry. And I think a lot about, I probably have a pretty low Christology, just me personally, because of my emphasis on the bodily human experiences of Jesus. But part of what I take from Dr. Terman's work with us this weekend, as you were, also saying, other folks, that Christians today cannot separate the cross and Jesus' suffering and crucifixion from the ways that people, particularly people of color in this country, people in the LGBTQ community, are being crucified every day, all the time in our society. And we have to attend to those real life impacts of the theology that requires a violent death for redemption, especially in a society where this violence is perpetrated on people with real bodies and real experiences. And on the part of some more privileged white folks, there's a kind of theological validation of that suffering because of Jesus' suffering that happens. And I think we need to dispense with that part, because we really need to pay attention to the folks on the margins who are having those daily experiences of crucifixion and marginalization.
And as you can see, I have a new university computer that my power cord did not function as I hoped, but hopefully that'll be taken care of in a minute. So thank you for jumping back in. And I think that takes us to Amy.
I went while you were out of the room.
You did? Okay. Well, sorry about that. Wow. Goodness gracious. And I didn't even have to lead worship this morning like some of you. So
all good.
Yeah. So the next question then, on the question 3, has to do with your different ministry settings, because each of you brings something different to the table in this way. So from that hat particularly, can you speak to your takeaways? So whether it's pastoral care, so 2 of you did a workshop on that, worship, Amy, spiritual formation, just from that particular vocation, can you speak to what the weekend might do, which may have some overlap with what you've already said, of course. And why don't we start with Dejon?
Yeah, I've always felt like we put, and by we I mean a large part of the white evangelical church,
okay,
has put prerequisites on people following Jesus, are being accepted by Jesus. You have to be this way, sound this way. You have to dress this way, talk this way, believe this way. And if you do, then you now have access to Jesus. Now you have his love. Now you have his acceptance. And I'm not gonna, this gathering has definitely helped me stand more firm in the opposite of that, right? But it has also challenged me to not have logistics to my love. And there's two quick things. I have two books in front of me. I'll be one from Taking on the Cross. I believe this is Graham Walker's essay. He says, Christ is the one who models the enduring power of divine love for humanity, and Christ is the one who demonstrates for humanity the transforming power of love in the world. And that stood out to me. And then I'm reading this book for my current job, and it's called Decolonizing Wealth. Fantastic book that Carol and Elijah had me reading. And on page 45, it says, while saying we want to be multicultural, really only allow other people and cultures to come in if they adapt or conform to what already exists in our cultural norm. And so I think what this does for me, sitting in this development and congregational engagement seat, is it pushes me to see people and love them, and not try to change them or mold them into what I believe God wants them to be. And I think all of us on this Zoom, those who are watching live, can agree that we can do better with that. That a lot of times we have logistics to our love, have logistics to our acceptance, have logistics to who we allow in our lives and how they function in our lives. And I think this gathering has helped me reimagine that. And in my space where I am responsible for raising money and moving money and engaging with people, you can't have logistics to love, because you never know who you're going to encounter, and you never know who is going to be that person who will ultimately help take your organization to the next level.
Wider view. Wow, well said. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Anita.
Thank you. So as Jamie's mentioned a couple of times, and some of y'all know, I'm a pastor, and I primarily work with children and youth and young adults, and I've studied children's ministry quite a bit, and wrote a chapter in Taking on the Cross about ministry with children, and something that has been, not necessarily surprising, but really stunning to me this weekend has been that almost every presenter that has been in the public space has referenced their experiences as children, or the experiences of children in their life as part of their journey about thinking about and deconstructing their theologies around Jesus' death. Almost every single person. And that is just a stunning thing to me. Like I feel like in a way this weekend has just like reminded me of my call to work with children, to be in ministry with children. And this just reminds me that children matter, and children's ministry matters, and ministers who work with children are not on a stepping stone to real pastoral ministry, but they're doing deep theological work with children in their care. And we need to resource those people who are doing work with children and support people working with children. Not saying that everybody has to go and get a seminary degree, because the state of higher education in this country is a whole other thing. But there needs to be some support for. I kind of imagine parallel tracks so that children are being formed theologically and offered spiritual formation activities and support, but also the adults working with them are, let's not offer answers to children's questions that are just easy for adults because we're uncomfortable and we don't know what to say about the cross. But we need that support for children's ministry folks as well, because what we're really going for here, I think, is we need a theology to offer our children, that are in our care, that won't cause them to suffer, that won't be the cause of suffering, and that they don't have to deconstruct later. I personally am not terribly concerned with, if the institutional church continues existing in its form as it is now, because, we're always going to be in relationship with the holy, and that's going to take a whole bunch of different forms. But it's definitely not going to if we don't support children in their spiritual formation and their questions that they're asking. So I guess all of that to say, I just feel really affirmed in my call. And it really inspires me that so many people over this weekend have been moved to talk about their experiences as children, and ask questions about, how can we get these resources? How can we be in conversation with each other? How can we continue lifting each other up as people in ministry with young folks? So I'm really taking that away from my ministry this week.
Thank you. That's wonderfully said. And I think probably a lot of adults relate to the fact, when you have to think about how you're going to say it to a child, I think it's a lot of work, because you have to, I once heard somebody say, if you can't put your idea on the back of my business card, you don't have a very clear idea. And I think there's something true about that in teaching children, right? It requires you having to work through, what do I actually think? And so reading your chapter, I think adults gain a lot from hearing people like you who work with children well. It helps us ask, wow, what do I think? I guess I never thought of it. And when you're teaching the children, a lot of times you're helping adults redeem, I think, some of their childhood messages. They get to do childhood again through the children's ministry, if it had been done well, so it's a gift, not just to children, but to the whole church, right? So, yeah. Amy, I was struck by a number of things, but this line in your chapter, putting words into people's mouths is a particularly weighty task. I never thought about that as the job of a worship leader, that you are putting words into someone else's mouth and asking them to say with their body, and how to do that with integrity. So I would love to hear then from your perspective, how does this work?
Yeah, that's always in the background, at least maybe in the foreground of my mind, is writing liturgy. And I carry, as perhaps some of you do, a big old Baptist inferiority complex, right? Especially in the academy. As a PhD student taking a course in liturgical theology at the University of Notre Dame's graduate program with Jeffrey Wainwright, like the giant of liturgical theology, this staid British elegant man, and he, with 46 priests and 7 Roman Catholic pastoral associates, and me sitting in the chair in the back corner by the door, the bolt position, so I could bolt and run if I had to. And he says, let's begin class for this semester with a brief ecclesiological survey. Are there any Baptists in the room? And they laughed. They thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. And here I am just kind of raising a hand. And then they're all like, what? There's a Baptist and it looks female? Oh, what is this even? So these imprinting experiences of our lives. But y'all, it is because we are Baptists that we could have this conference, right? Mm-hmm. It's because we are Alliance of Baptists, and we don't have to fear that if we open up a conversation that's sticky, that somebody is going to pull their money and we're going to have to bring our missionaries home from the field because we can't staff them anymore. It is only because we're Baptist and there's not a hierarchy, because you can better believe there would be a filter up there somewhere that would say, yeah, we're not doing this. Mm-hmm. Because we are Baptist and because we are the Alliance of Baptists, we can do really courageous things. We can have brave conversations together. So that doesn't really have anything to do with putting words in people's mouths liturgically, so that, well, except that it does, because planning worship is a courageous task too. because of the balance between what we can affirm and our aspirations, where we want to go, who we want to be, how we're going to become those people, that community that we want to be on behalf of love for the world. The closer we can keep that to the very front of our working tool set, I think the better able we are to be who we want to be.
I heard you also emphasizing in your context when you all took on this bold task that you did to kind of rethink the atonement and how you do worship around it. You didn't do a top-down thing. People could stand up and say that what you had written out that day with integrity because you had brought them along through the entire conversation and invited everybody into it. So you weren't asking somebody to stand up and say something that sounded just like so foreign and crazy to them by the time you asked them to do it, which takes a lot of work, right? And a lot of patience and a lot of relationship building. So I loved that, you know, and again, it's one of the gifts of our being Baptist, that we're all, it depends on all of us. Yeah. Good. Robert, what would you say? I'll just restate in case in terms of your ministry setting, what are your takeaways? So your particular vocational setting.
Thank you for that. I was going to ask you to repeat the question.
It's been a while.
Dejon, Amy, Anita got me like, yes, it's expanding more. It's blowing up some more. In terms of my ministry, because I'm in such a state of transitions and having finished dissertation work and defense and all of that, I'm very attuned to stigma. And because my context is a inpatient psychiatric institution, was federal and now it's DC government. And so our individuals live there. And most of them have co-occurring disorders. I mean, they have 2 or 3 or 4 things going on. So I'm always aware of that. And I know when we were talking about our workshop, as it relates to Pastor carrying the cross, one of the things I was mindful of was not to paint the cross as a hindrance for people that have mental illness, because it's not always a hindrance. A lot of times it's the thing that helps them stay grounded, along with the hymns and the scripture and the verse. And in my context, it's not unusual for Islamic patients to be sitting in worship with Christians and Catholics. Everybody goes to everything, Jewish. And I find that very, very beautiful, because what it continues to show me is how open they are to seeing where God is in our life, not just in the book or not just in the pew, but where are they able to see God? And so the takeaway for me is to continue to hear how others in my context and in my future context, which will be veterans, how do they relate to the cross? You know, because I think we all come from different places, and I'm one of those people that believe childhood has formed us and shaped us, and having sat at bedsides in the end of life, I'm very well aware and attuned to people tapping back into childhood because of unresolved or resolved issues. So this weekend has opened me up more, in a sense, to be able to be aware of, one, not imposing my stuff on others. People don't need to see the cross like I see the cross. They don't need to relate to God the way I relate to God. And that's also my training. But this weekend gave me new perspectives on that. I often say it's interesting because our hospital has a very familial feel. I mean, people have been there 30, 40, 50 years. And we see them all the time. You know, it's like they say, you spend a lot of time at work. Well, ours is at hospital. And so we're with patients all the time. And well, not all the time, a majority of the time. But I often find that staff are more challenging than the individuals. We call them individuals in care, not patients in our setting. And it's almost like the parents or y'all help me, don't crucify me for this, but the church members who have certain ways and traditions, and that's what they want to impose on the patients. And you're going to hell and you got to repent for this and you got to do that. And so I often hear the downside of things, the negative side, the fire and brimstone side. I rarely hear staff saying to someone, it's okay that you didn't have a best day. It's okay that you are feeling guilty or ashamed. It's okay. And yes, Jesus still loves you. So I'm always working with staff trying to move them. And it's like moving the mountain. I got one pebble at a time to try to move them into that place. And I have found that since I've been in chaplaincy, that's usually where my work lies. Patients, individuals, as we call them, are usually pretty open. They're in a very vulnerable state. So they're looking for someone to be non-judgmental and authentic and to listen. And I always say, the greatest goal is just as simply as someone knows that they matter. Doesn't matter what you're going through, you still matter. Your pain matters, your joys matter, your hurt matters, you matter. You mean something, not just to me, but to God. And so to remind people of that, I try to be the mirror. So this weekend is just, it's helping me look differently. And that's one of the great joys of the weekend for me.
Nice. Thank you. It's incredibly rich. They're very fortunate to have you, both the staff and the individuals. Drew.
As a hospital chaplain, a lesson that I learn all the time, again and again, is that so much of our spiritual and theological lives is formed and felt, like we know it, in the interpersonal sphere, in the emotional sphere. Our ability to reflect on our theology, to name our theology, our ability to connect with God, to understand God's love is felt and interpreted through our lens of what we're feeling and experiencing in whatever our present situation is. So to me, it's like important to ask the questions of, do I have what I need to feel loved? Do I have what I need to feel accepted? Do I have relationships that are secure and reliable attachments? Do I feel safe from violence or pain? Are people living in a place where they're exposed to violence? As Amy was saying, are we living with a chronic stress? Do we have fear in our bones that come from power and oppression? And if any of those things are happening for any of us, that informs who God is in our lives to a certain extent, whether consciously or not. It's, what we experience changes what we can know and feel. And so to me, as a chaplain, I don't necessarily start with the theological concept. I'm thinking about, what is this person feeling in this moment? And how does that then inform their theology? And so to me, it's like that lesson is like, how is that a lesson for all of us of how do we make sure that we are loved and cared for? How do we make sure others are loved and cared for? Because what is the point of claiming new and helpful theologies if people are hurting? That we have to work with that sense of care and connection as one of the foundational aspects of this work. And so for me as a chaplain, it's always like, what are we feeling and what do we need? What do we need to be safe and cared for and loved? And so that's my takeaway.
And that's a perfect segue into the next question, which some of you have already spoken to some degree, so you can feel free to repeat that. So we've mentioned about it being safe space. So the question I was going to ask was, what has it meant for you to be in safe space, to have deep conversations about some of the core theological ideas for the Christian faith? So if anybody wants to add to that question, anybody who wants to repeat what you've said about that, because some of you have noted that, so you could repeat and emphasize what you said. And if you didn't speak to it, feel free.
So here's the thing. I feel kind of spoiled because I had the opportunity to be a part of this annual gathering and watch this public expression over these past couple of days. But on the other side, what we were a part of these past couple of days, this isn't just like something that the Alliance is doing publicly, just to put on the face, like we're progressive and we're gonna have these conversations publicly and we're a different person behind the scenes. What people have viewed over these past couple of days is truly the DNA, the fabric of this organization. And I say I'm spoiled because I get to go to work every day and work with fantastic, amazing, genuine people who just want to do what's right, who really want to fight for justice, who really want to make sure that we are creating safe spaces. And, I have to shout my co-directors out, Carol and Elijah, who do such a great job with creating those spaces and who do such a great job with making sure that we're doing the work and not just talking about doing the work. And so from someone who had to, and I think I said this earlier, I'll say it again, for someone who had to kind of run over here and be Black in this area, and then run over here and be LGBTQ in this area, and then run over here and be really Christian over in this area, to now be in a space where I can be all of me in one place and not feel judgment or condemnation or just weird feels great. And I don't think I would have had that experience in its fullness if I were just coming to the gathering. But having the experience of working with these amazing people and doing this work, coupled with attending the gathering, I mean, this is somewhere I could see myself forever. I mean, it's that kind of place because we're doing great work. And Carol, I think you're on this call. This is my plea to get a $100,000 raise. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. And Dejon, just so you know, I also dyed my hair before the conference too. So you said you dyed the hair right before the conference. Me too.
We're twins.
Yeah, we're twins. So it's a place you
I
can
love
do
it.
that. Dye your hair blonde and come to the conference. Yeah.
But it's
yeah,
and it's so needed. It's so needed.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you. I kid a lot, I joke around a lot, but I really mean this when I say it. It is so refreshing to be in a space where you can be your full self. That is what this gathering has done. And thank you all for leaning in and opening yourselves up and having the conversations. It's not just this staff, it's not just the planning committee, it is you allowing yourself to come and be open as well. So I'll be quiet. Thank
And what
you.
I love about it too, it's not just you can come and be this, it's that it's not just like someone's tolerating or welcoming or doing you some favor. It's that you're needed here. It's that feeling that every one of us, it's not just like, oh, we're welcome. We're needed. Oh my gosh, you're here. We've been waiting for you. There's work to do. Where are you slotting in and what's your call to do? Where are you fitting into the scheme? There's no bystanders. I love it. Everyone's here to work, so I love it. Other folks want to jump in with any, I see we're down to our last minute here. So any other last comment anyone wants to make about this kind of what it means to be in such a safe space, like that Dejon said, that's real, it's not fake, right? Any other comments about the power of that?
I think
Robert,
what you just said about it being real. And as I was thinking about that and the spaces I've been in, you know, I'm one of those people that believe true relationships are formed because we can disagree and love. I teach my students and tell them, you know, we don't trust people we can't disagree with and love. We don't form relationships with people we can't. If you're in a relationship and everything is always, I mean always, the same and okay, and there's never any discomfort, that's a challenging relationship to be in and to love in, because there's something possibly not as authentic. I do know couples who don't fight or who don't disagree a lot. So I'm not saying that that's not possible, but I am saying that the majority of us enter a relationship, and the being in the alliance has always been that place for me, where we can have tough conversations, and I mean tough, online, offline, on screen, off screen, in person, on the phone. And at the end of the day, love still rules. We're still going to love each other. We're still going to care for each other. We're still going to know that we are a family. You know, we're not just the alliance, we're an alliance family. And I think for me, that is what has always made me feel safe. What has always pulled and called out my gifts. I tried to be one of those people that didn't do much and watch on the sideline. Carol wasn't having it. So thank you, Carol. This was years ago. I was like, I'm not doing nothing. She's like, yeah. But I think the other thing you just said, Jamie, was in our organization, we don't really let you sit on the sidelines. We're like, you got gifts. We don't know what they are. We see some. Come use them. You don't know what they are? Let's figure them out. You want to explore? Let's try that too. And that is who we really are. We're just that kind of family. We're like, no, everybody belongs at the table, doing something at the table, and finding who else is not at the table. And that's what we do. And I think those are the, you know, that's the core of what always continues to pull me into the alliance. It continues to help me go deeper in the alliance, continues to root me in the alliance. Just those things. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank everybody on this panel for your leadership, not just at the conference, but beyond, in the denomination, in the church. It really is just such a gifted group, and an honor to sit with you and learn from you and hear you process your own experience of the weekend. So with that, I think I will hand it over to Tim if you want to say any last words, Tim. But wow, you all are just incredibly gifted and inspiring. So please keep doing what you do and leading out so the rest of us can follow in your footsteps faithfully with joy.
Jamie, thanks for leading a great panel, and for Anita and Robert and Dejon and Drew and Amy, thank you all so much for helping all of us to reflect right now in the moment, and for those who will be watching this recording in a few days when it's emailed to them, to help them process things. Just thank you so much for sharing yourself and your experience to allow all of us to reimagine our own reflections on this weekend. I'm truly grateful. And I believe that concludes everything. Y'all have a great day.
Amen.
Blessings, everybody. Thank you.